Everyone who humbles himself shall be exalted. Contrary, of course, is doubly true. We know, don't we, what a bore is, a person who is centre stage. One observes in the comedy of human life a very high proportion of humanity which unfortunately performs well on this issue. I. It happens subtly, however, and the more proud they are, the more subtle it is. In the monastic life, a typical one is who is doing the talking during recreation? What is the topic of recreation? Trace it back, it is to the same one. The others follow. Bring it down to a more subtle one. We all like, do we not, to let out some hint of something that is glorious to us. It won't be direct, but we'll get it in. A person who is not in need of being scratched, flattered, honoured, glorified and beatified will go through life in a different mode. Now, examine, where do you fit in this? In conversation, do we or do we not let the person finish? The very act of letting a person get to the end is an act of what? Giving the stage, but also registering this message that perhaps I have something to learn. Analyze the way next time you are talking to somebody. Look into your mind. See if, while the other person is talking, you are actually calculating already what to say. If you are, stop that mental process and open the other ear to hear what that person is still saying, for that person may not yet have got to the point. You will find at the end that you will perhaps, for once, not have dominated. Some of the most beautiful souls that you will meet will be souls who will not talk an awful lot. Also, they will not talk with the maximum of decibels possible. They will not be cold, taciturn, or absent. They will say enough. Moreover, they will practice one great mercy, that of being interesting. For again, look at the bore. He can't hear himself. He doesn't know when people are hurting and would prefer if he got away from the center of the stage. Look then around the globe. Magnify. What is a star? When one observes people who in life have had great success, it is interesting to look at their private life and their personality and to see how it is altered. Very few resist the illness, the cancer of fame in its effect on the soul. Some do. There are some good examples. Often they're linked precisely with a link with Christ because they have a higher point of reference. One day, in about 1967 or 67 it was, I happened to be visiting my brother in Oxford and I noticed that somebody was handing out tracts. It was a student who wanted me to go to hear Cliff Richard in one of the evangelical Anglican churches in Oxford because he was giving his testimony. And that is an example of somebody who, because he was brought to Christ, was not too much contaminated by what had hit the others in the same showbiz. Christ is a higher point of reference, and Christ refers to the Father, of whom one thinks on this day there was a mystic called Mother Eugenia who wanted this first Sunday of August somewhat orientated to ordering thoughts towards the maximum, paternity and origin, seen particularly clearly in the East because of their emphasis on the paternity. We look at the Trinity in slightly a more different way based on St. Augustine, but the essence is the same. God from God, light from light, the Father. One of you gave me this some years ago, and people think it's Christ. I am told actually it's probably the fatherhood, and the crown is on the ground. He is glorious and serene, and does not need to raise his voice, for he will have the last word. And before that last word, the noisiest person in showbiz will be silent at the last breath, and his soul will go forth and meet. And if he is ready, he will see. If he's not ready, he will wait. If he is orientated against, he will never see, and he will wait forever. No matter how much noise and flattery he had in this world, it could be quite the reverse. Whereas I am pleasantly surprised, week after week, to find quite often treasures of the other, hidden glorious gems, often in the females of the travelling community, who in this world will be category B, but maybe will go like rockets to category A and overtake many great men in the life to come. I come back to where I started. The humble soul is a soul tendentially not noisy. This came to me the other day, Il Silenzio. It is a collection of gems, great authors on silence. And looking through these pages, I discover hidden niches and angles of this mystery of silence which I hadn't even contemplated before. The saints got it right, and usually they knew its importance. For instance, John of the Cross, in his Maxims, says that the great talker is not in the right place. This goes into the various levels of silence, starting with that of the mouth, and if it's not there, we're in pure illusion. But then it goes into the silence of the heart and the mind. Again, when you're talking to someone else, see how silent and therefore receptive is your mind. But there is something else, and I want to bring it to you, each of you today. It's that we are more than those who wrote these lines centuries ago, contaminated by a third. It's what is coming at us from the way we spend our time. To sit with a book is to be silent and receptive, because we can't answer a book back, and we have to do also the mental work. To sit before a screen is not the same operation. Now, it is good to use a library. It is good to have new things coming in. And in our day, we can have a whole library in our room. I mean through good use of Googling, good use, mature use, which we have to know how to handle. It's not the same when one goes then into YouTube and all that goes with that. It's a more powerful input, and it makes us different inside. It also absorbs in a way the other doesn't, because it pulls up other things in the margin, each one more interesting than the other and recommended for you. You know what I mean? Now, watch what's going on there. We are being changed from people of silence, interior silence I mean, to people of noise. And we are also being conditioned, And this brings me to another specific point. We know now something of the extent to which some channels are infested. Therefore, willingly to go into them and give them stage is already to collude and to play the game of the enemy. Some channels are more neutral than others. I was just talking this morning to my brother, and we were talking about Uncle Gwyn, a preacher who was also, until he died, a person who had a television program, as many did who were ministers. And in those days, and actually still to some extent, because my brother's head of the television there, they don't want this agenda on Welsh television. Why should they? It's everyone's. And do you know that Welsh television invented the Bible for children in puppets and cartoons, and my brother was proud of it. There was none of this going on. That's very different from what's out there in RTE. Be careful every time you switch that channel on. It's not the same. I don't know what BBC itself is at, I just don't know, but I think it's probably more balanced. I know they got involved with us one time in the monastery, and they were keen on getting a balanced thing. There was no agenda at all. Be careful, because it's you. You don't realize it, but you think the thoughts of others, and it's far more subtle than you think, because it's by a process of erosion and osmosis that the thoughts of the other one get into us and become the norm. I just conclude. When John Logie Baird came across the phenomenon of the capacity to produce an image through a tube, he died in 1946, having invented primitive television. He was amazed at the power that could be harnessed, but had no idea of the power that would be actually harnessed through it. What happened in those days was a good thing. The power of man conquering the elements and orientating them. It was neutral. And it was fairly primitive because it was based on a principle of the iod tube in which this material is able to be influenced by electrons and then illuminate itself and become therefore a picture. Now digital is quite a different process. So it's the same but far more advanced. Therefore, it's far more pervasive and all over the globe instantly, and therefore we are engaged with all that's coming out there from people we don't know, also demonic. So it's extremely important every time you get into that virtual world of the internet to invoke the Holy Ghost, because you're exposing yourself to what comes out also from the depths of hell. And once it's in your mind, it's in there, because once seen, it's never unseen. Be careful what you open the screen of your retina to, because old Nick is wanting permission to enter, and that's one channel he has. I just conclude. Be grateful for the wonderful things you have, but be mature, because the immature person is the person who is controlled by an instrument and doesn't know how to control it. BBC. One day, a team came from the BBC to film at the Abbey in Italy, even though we ourselves had no television with which to see it. Upon a round electron, sight and sound can move along the skies and settle well, where we'll see nothing go. And they abound in wires that store our song, soft fires that tell their hidden spark deep in the dark of night, that gazes at amazing rays so poised tween now and having been.
for there is might upon a molecule of silence noised. O flame that hit the lonely night of man with sense of nothing sensate, with no prong of matter made, but weighed with heat that can the want of all quench in a gentle song. Move onward in the dark and mark the hour that came to be, and saw with singed power